Thank you for the opportunity to be who I am, where I am, and with what I have at this moment in time. I am grateful for all of the experience I've had, the lessons I've learned, and the people I've met. I love who I am, and I'm excited about the infinite power I have to create the future I desire and deserve. I'm proud of what I do and the impact it has in our world that only I can have.
Welcome to A Higher Branch, a source of practical and powerful information for busy people dedicated to boosting their personal health and professional performance. I'm your host, Sam McCall. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of A Higher Branch podcast. Stacey Copas is an incredible woman I met at Upgrade Your Life 2020. She's a speaker, coach and author, and what I love most about her is the way she's helping people deal with adversity, and by sharing her own story on living with quadriplegia, she demonstrates to others how to be resilient in business and in life. I was lucky enough to have a conversation with you at Upgrade Your Life, Stacey, and your focus on gratitude and journaling was of particular interest to me, and I thought it would be of particular interest to all our viewers. And on that note, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our podcast.
It is fabulous to be here, and Upgrade Your Life definitely was a really great experience for me, and it was a great way to start the year, and just the conversations and the connections that came from that have been really pivotal in getting this year started really well.
Absolutely. Well, for me, I had many highlights at the event, but definitely up there for me, one of my highlights was meeting yourself, and that's why I wanted to meet you. I want to read your book, but more importantly, I want you to share your knowledge and your wisdom with our community, especially during these times where adversity is now rampant, not so much personally, but it's become a collective fear. I'm talking about this coronavirus. And, when we're dealing with fear that's rampant like that, it is an adversity, isn't it? But look, for those people who have not met you, do you mind sharing your story of what happened when you were only 12 years of age?
Yeah, so back at 12, it was a pivotal point in my life, and it was I guess the biggest thing that happened at that point. I was cooling off in a relative's backyard swimming pool with my younger brother who was 10.
Yes.
And a couple of other boys who were around the same age, and it was somewhere I'd been before. It was somewhere I was quite familiar with, but being the only girl and being that bit older than them, I was like, meh, don't want anything to do with them. So what I did every time I was there is I used to just climb up on the edge of the pool and just keep diving in, and it was just an above ground pool, so it definitely was not a diving pool,
right? But
it was something that I always did.
Yes.
And so on this day I was doing that, and I was just diving in over and over again, and I was getting yelled at to stop, but being 12 and bulletproof and invincible, I was like not listening to that, and I just kept doing that. And then this one particular time I ended up standing on the edge of the pool and thinking I felt like I was splashing too much as I was diving in.
Right.
So I stood there for a moment and I just thought, well, how can I dive without splashing so much? And so I thought that if I tried to keep my legs straighter and hold my feet together, in theory, I thought that would make a nice clean entry into the water. So I took a deep breath and did exactly that. And it felt like any other dive that I'd done before until I went to try and swim up to the surface, and I realised I couldn't move. So I was stuck at the bottom of the pool, holding my breath. I didn't feel any pain, didn't feel like anything had gone wrong, but I just could not move. So I desperately was trying to get the attention of my brother, which I couldn't do. So I held my breath for as long as I could.
So you remember this vividly?
Absolutely vividly, every single moment of that. And, I don't know how long it was, but obviously it felt like an eternity. And it was just sheer panic and terror of trying to, just thinking like, I can only hold my breath for so long. And eventually I couldn't hold it any longer.
Right.
And I just had to give in. And as I breathed in and my lungs filled with water, I blacked out. And, eventually my brother realised that I wasn't joking, and he pulled me out. And it was only recently I actually had lunch with one of the other guys that was in the pool with me that day, just before Christmas. I haven't seen him it was 29 years ago. I hadn't seen him since that day.
Wow.
And it was a really interesting conversation to have with him about his memories of the day. And so he said he remembers so much that they all thought I was just joking, and that was like splashing at me.
Yes.
And then, once they realised something was wrong, they pulled me out. And so I got taken to the local hospital, and, at the third hospital late that night in intensive care, I ended up having a doctor come and tell me that I'd actually broken my neck and drowned and I'd never walk again.
Wow. So that was a defining moment in your life.
Well, yeah, it was pretty much I felt like my life was over in that moment. It was the end of the life as I knew it and planned it.
And at that age, you already knew what you wanted to do when you were older.
Yeah.
What was that?
Yeah, I guess I was pretty rare in the fact that before I even started primary school, I knew what I wanted to do. And all I wanted to do was be a vet. So all through my schooling, those primary school age schooling, everything was focused on that. And at 12, I was at the end of year 6. I went to school here in New South Wales.
Right.
And I'd actually passed the entrance exams, and I got a first round offer to go to Hurlstone Agricultural, which is a selective agricultural school. So, of course, that was a huge tick on that next step, to being a vet. But aside from that, I was an athlete as well. So
That's right.
Yeah, I played softball. I was a pitcher in the softball team. I was one of the first 2 girls to ever play soccer for my school. And I was a rep runner every distance from the 100 metres to the cross country.
Up until that point, had you had any other defining moments in your life? And I call them defining moments because you recall at Upgrade Your Life, we talked about defining moments.
Yeah, with Guy Winch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guy Winch, David Goggins talked about it. I talked about my 2 defining moments. So obviously that is a huge defining moment for someone, right? How did you deal with that adversity at the time, being only 12? Was it easier or harder at that age?
In hindsight, once I was in my teens, I definitely thought I had it easier compared to most. Because I had a stint in hospital in my late teens, and it was there that I became more aware of the other people that were there. And I was seeing, particularly I think the people that I thought probably had it a hell of a lot worse than I did, was the guys in their 30s that had families, that were tradies with their own businesses, that had mortgages, and all of those levels of responsibility. Whereas the only thing I had was focus on me at that point in time. So I really feel that it was probably it's never a good time to have something like this happen. But I felt if anything was going to happen, it was probably a really good time for that to happen.
Because I've heard you say that was the best thing that ever happened to you.
I know, yeah.
For some of us that are listening to this right now, and for people that are watching, they're probably thinking, how can that be the best thing that could ever happen? Because it's, for someone like me, I would think that would be really tragic. I've had some tragic things in my life as well. Everyone's, defining moment is relative to them, but this completely changed the trajectory of your life, and more importantly, the impact that you have had on others since then, because you've touched the lives of many, and I want to get into that as well, because your coaching, especially for business leaders, is invaluable, and we'll talk about that. But so how did you deal with the adversity? So you didn't feel like there was any adversity at all?
At the time, absolutely I did. So a lot of that shift in perspective came much, much, much later in the piece. So
when you say much later, you mean when you were a teenager?
Like years later. Yeah,
okay.
that perspective of being able to go, wow, that was an amazing thing that happened, came much later. At the beginning, as I said earlier, I felt like my life was over, because I was like, okay, I can't be a vet. I can't walk, let alone run, to play all the sports I used to do. And my identity at that point was athlete, and that I was going to be a vet.
So you lost your identity.
I lost my identity. And so, and being 12, I was just about to go into high school. That point in time is there's so much stuff that happens. Identity is so huge. We're always at that point, we're trying to find our way. We're trying to figure out where we fit in, why we're here, the dynamics we have with other people. And so I had that as well as this. And so I ended up spending 7 months in hospital. So I missed the first 6 months of high school. I couldn't go to that selective agricultural high school. It wasn't accessible. I needed support. So I ended up getting shipped off to a school nowhere near where I lived. I didn't know a single soul, and I rocked up there in the middle of the year. So that was challenging in itself. So in those first few years, probably the first even 3 to 5, I would have given anything to have either turned back the clock and not taken that dive, or to have not been there at all.
Because a lot of people would go there, wouldn't they?
Sure.
What if I didn't?
Absolutely.
That rumination that Dr. Guy Winch talks about. How long did you ruminate for? And you did confess to me that you went through some depression and you became suicidal at one stage. When did that happen, and what led to it at the time?
Yeah, look, my way of coping through those years was...
And I'm sorry if I'm bringing these emotions back out again.
Oh, no, it's real.
Yeah, and our life story only has meaning when we share it with others.
Completely. And it was something that I really didn't share with anybody until into my 30s, until I wrote my book. Like, I kept all of it to myself.
Yes.
Which wasn't healthy. But yeah, I spent a lot of my teenage years drunk and stoned. That was my out. And
Doesn't sound like such a bad thing. But
well, I think a lot of us did it. A lot of us did it anyway.
Yeah, I'm kidding. Yeah.
But what I looked at was, by doing that, I was trying to seek these moments of artificial happiness.
Yes.
And what that led to in between was getting deeper and darker into the despair and the anxiety and the self-loathing in between.
Yes.
And it did get to a point where I didn't want to be here at all. And, in hindsight, what I realised is that, physically I drowned once, but emotionally I was drowning every single day for most of those years. So it was definitely a super challenging time. And as I said, it was one of those things that I completely kept it to myself.
So was your turnaround a gradual thing, or was there another defining moment where you just said enough?
There was 2 things that I sort of saw during that time. The first one was what stopped me from getting stoned all the time. I was at the point where I was actually getting stoned at school.
Yep.
I had a couple of moments where I was so stoned I couldn't speak at school, and I had friends cover for me and all that sort of stuff. And I just got to the point where I'm like, this is ridiculous. I was getting foggier and foggier, and I'm like, it's got to stop. So that was when I was about 16, so year 10. So pulled the pin on that. And then a little bit later in high school, I had my real rock bottom moment where I found myself alone at home and just so desperate for, just the pain and the self-loathing and that just to go. And I found myself with, a bottle of prescription medication and a bottle of water. And the only thing that stopped me in that moment from doing that was the fear that someone would find me before I was gone and I would end up worse than where I was. Yeah.
Totally get that. And when you say somebody, is that you're talking about your parents, siblings?
Oh, yeah, anyone. That was the fear. And if I had had a guarantee at that time that wouldn't have happened, I wouldn't be here today. So I'm really glad that sort of voice had sort of come and did that.
Where do you think that voice came from? Is that your inner essence fighting?
Yeah, and I guess so in that sense. And it was that what it did for me though was it scared the life. It nearly scared the life out of me. But it was one of those things that it scared me so much because you never ever think that you will find yourself personally in a situation where you're contemplating that. There's a lot of judgment.
Yes.
From society around. Suicidal thoughts and things like that, and people have a judgment of like, how can anything be so bad that you would contemplate that? And so finding myself in that situation, that was the real shift to go, look, this is this proverbial fork in the road. You've either got to get on with it, give up or get on with it.
Absolutely. And I don't think a lot of people realise that how fine our life rests in the balance, and that we can all get there very, very quickly. Through a series of events, 1 event, 2 events. And I recently did a course on safe driving, and because I'm one of those people who loses their license every now and then, I think the government said, enough, you have to go do a course. and I begrudgingly turned up to this course. I think I told the guys recently this story, but it keeps coming back to me because listening to your story reminds me of one of the stories that I watched during this course, where this person had the ordinary life. Then his brother had a car accident and died. And then his other brother became depressed and committed suicide. And it's funny how our life can just shift in an instant. And we need to be prepared. We need to... most people rush to being resilient when they need to. But your message is you need to prepare yourself for life. You need to be always in a state of practicing resilience and knowing how to deal with adversity. And really, that's what I want to talk to you about, because I think really a lot of young people need to hear this as well. I think resilience is the number one skill that we need to be teaching people and young people. Not trigonometry, not Shakespeare. There's so much, emphasis on, all these things external to us, but not enough about, the internal, what's going on in our internal world. And we should never put ourselves in a position where our whole world can be rocked from one event. We've got to be able to take the body blows that life throws at us. So I want to talk to you about that. And one of the things you say is gratitude is the key to success. And I love that. If you remember that, I talked about gratitude a lot at Upgrade Your Life, because it's the perfect antidote to unhappiness.
Yeah, completely.
And even depression, right? So what can you tell us about the way you practice gratitude and the way you teach it?
Yeah, and gratitude for me, that was the key point going back that enabled me to really get on with it. And part of that was shifting the way that I looked at the accident. And I actually started to look at it, and I looked at it with gratitude. And I was grateful that I had that accident and how it changed my life.
So how did you reframe it then?
Exactly like that. I just reframed it, that I was grateful that I had the accident, and I was grateful for how it changed my life. So
do you want to just take us through the self-talk that goes on how to reframe something from an apparent tragedy to it's the best thing?
Yeah, and it basically it's a choice. And a lot of people will turn around and go, it's not that simple. And I'm like, actually it is. It is actually really, really simple. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it was just simple. And so it was actually doing that. And again, most people go, how the hell does ending up a quadriplegic and needing a wheelchair for the rest of your life positive? But I can say with absolute certainty that I've had the most incredible experiences since then, and especially since I reframed the way I looked at it, that I would have never had if my life had have taken a different path. But yeah, gratitude is a lot of the time we hear about, writing down the things you are grateful for. Yes. And sometimes I find that can be a little bit challenging for people. So for me, I use mantras, and that's what I've ended up doing. And so it started out, my gratitude process has evolved over the years, and it just used to start off with, is this just like I'm grateful for, where I am and what I have.
Yes.
And that has now ended up being that every night, each night when I close my eyes, when I go to bed, I repeat, my gratitude mantra, and also if I find myself in a rut during the day. And so, usually it's just the first line of it, which is thank you for the opportunity to be who I am, where I am, with what I have at this moment in time. And that gets you grounded in the moment right now.
I love that. Let's break that down.
Yeah.
There's quite a few elements there. There's 4 elements.
Yeah. So it's grateful for who I am.
Yes.
And everything about who you are. Then there's the where I am, and there's the what you have at this moment in time. And I think that's really the key point, is it's at this moment in time. Because if we are completely in the moment, we can't feel anxious.
Yes.
Because anxiety is the thought about what's coming ahead.
Yes, okay.
I don't believe we can feel
that.
depressed in the moment either, because depression's more about what's happened in the past.
That's right, it's regret. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if we can ground ourselves in the moment at any given time, then it eliminates those two things.
Very powerful. So depression lives in the past, anxiety lives in the future. And there's a lot of anxiety going on in the world today about what the future could bring for people's health. So how would you reframe that?
Yeah. I still think gratitude is super important in this moment because, again, so much of what's happening is about what might happen. And I read recently, again, because people are getting so fixated on the media and the news at the moment, and that's feeding the fear. And one of the questions that came up is it's like, how can you tell if something's news? Something is news if it's reporting on something that has happened.
Yes.
If it's speculating on what may happen, it is merely an opinion. So people need to look at the lens of that when they're actually looking at, is this news? Yeah. And even at any time, I find is that if something really feels overwhelming and challenging, it is just coming back to that, I'm grateful. I may not feel it right now, but even just by the message we tell ourselves, we can shift that. So it brings it back into the moment. And then there's a few other lines that I use with the gratitude as well. It's I'm grateful for all of the experiences I've had, the lessons I've learned, and the people I've met. Because that's one of the things that I always find gratitude is so much about the journey we've had. Even if it has not been what we wanted, we've got people in our lives that would not have been there, again, had our life taken the path that we had designed.
Absolutely. Now, who is the person that you've met on that journey that has had the most impact on your life?
Oh, wow, there's been quite a few actually, but I think the one that has made the biggest difference has been in more recent times, and that was Lane Beachley. You know, she's been an amazing person, and I came to her through her foundation, which unfortunately wound up the foundation now, but for many, many years she ended up was 500 women that over the years that she supported financially and with mentoring, and it was all about women that were already doing great things to help them reach higher levels. So having someone like her who has an incredible journey herself to show belief in what I'm doing and what I was doing, that was super powerful. And then that brought me into an amazing community and things like that as well. So, she's been somebody that's been really good. And again, I was someone that I admired from afar, and then being able to then have a personal connection with her was amazing. So
what is the one thing that she teaches that had the biggest impact on yourself and others? What was that quality that she had, or that message rather?
Yeah, I think the big thing for me was, again, just that having that belief in yourself and being okay to actually stand out. Because I think what I've experienced, in Australia, tall poppy syndrome is such a huge challenge. And I think for women it's even more challenging. So to actually then be able to put your hand up and celebrate your success publicly, that was a big one, because I know I grew up in Western Sydney. It was one of those things that it was like, don't stand out, don't say that you're good at anything. People will think you're a big head. There's always that cutting down. So we grew up minimising ourselves and our success. So coming into her community, it was a matter of going, you got to stand out, you got to shine. The foundation was called Aim for the Stars. So it was about doing that and really owning your stuff and being proud of it.
I love that. Why do you think that element is still there in Australian society? I think in the world, actually.
It's actually way more prevalent in Australia. It's from people I've spoken to. I think England has got a little bit of it as well. But I guess there's probably a link, considering that we're colonised by the British.
Well, it is a regal quality to, stay modest, under the radar. And Meghan Markle's experiencing that at the moment, because in royalty you're supposed to just stay quiet and humble and not speak out. But that goes against a lot of what we're hear from motivational gurus or inspirational people who say shine brightly, and especially women, I think, are being told to stand up and assert themselves. But the moment they do, they get chopped down. So it's a bit of a tug of war going on with two mixed messages.
It's really hard. And also, too, a lot of the challenges with women is it's other women, unfortunately, that are the ones that are probably the worst at cutting each other down. And that was something that, through Lane's foundation, it was probably the first solely woman-focused organisation I'd been a part of, that everyone was genuinely had each other's backs. it was the best mutual admiration society, and everyone was inspired by each other. No one was threatened. No one saw each other as competition. Everyone was genuinely backing each other. And even now, years later, like I've got the most amazing friendships and relationships from that group of people. And I know that I could pick up the phone to any one of them now or another 5 years down the track, and I know that they will still have my back.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you found your tribe.
I found my tribe, and then obviously I found my new tribe as far as the higher branch community as well.
Yeah.
With coming into Upgrade Your Life, which as I said, I was looking for that tribe and that community of like-minded people. So I'm very grateful that I've found that now.
Yeah, I'm grateful for it too. There was a definite click in the room, wasn't there, between everyone?
100%.
Yeah. But let's go back to gratitude, because I talked about that at length at Upgrade Your Life, and so for those of you who are listening to our podcast for the first time, I talk about situational gratitude. So because most people who do practice gratitude will write in their gratitude journal for 10 minutes at the end of the day, but they're out of 16 waking hours, 10 minutes is 1% of your day. So my question is, what are you walking around with for the 99% of the day? Are you walking around with, focusing on what you don't have, taking what you have for granted? The 1% cannot defeat the 99%, if you know what I mean. That if you have 99% negativity and then you've got this 1%, it'll drown it out. So I urge people to be in a constant state of gratitude, and in every interaction, having a glass of water, a coffee, feeling the sunshine, putting your clothes on, getting into the car, putting the radio on, you can feel grateful for every interaction. And what you said earlier reminded me of that, and that's why I wanted to remind our listeners that you can't practice gratitude as one segment of your day and it's just like a part of you. No, it's not a part of you. It needs to become the whole of you. So if you walk around with, continual gratitude in your heart, you become invincible, don't you?
Absolutely. And
that's what you experience.
Yeah, I do. And that's what you probably noticed. It's almost like I have a permanent smile on my face because I'm always in gratitude. I'm in constant wonder and amazement of the fact that we're here.
So tell me
itself.
Absolutely. So tell me, from the moment you woke up this morning to arriving in our office, what are the things that you were grateful for throughout that, all that self-talk, because you really believe in mantras and positive self-talk.
Yeah.
So what are some of just as an example for people that are listening, because a lot of people will say, oh yeah, but how do I practice gratitude? What do you mean? Like, I'm grateful for the food, I'm grateful for my family, but it's more than that, isn't it?
It is. And that's what I touched on before. It's like, because everyone just goes, write down all these things you're grateful for. I find that becomes a bit wanky.
Yeah.
Because people just sort of go, and they're not really feeling it anyway.
Yeah.
And that's why I find mantras, and just, as you said, I love the way you describe it. It's a situational one. So as soon as my alarm goes off in the morning at, 20 to 6 or whenever it is, sometimes the first instinct most people go is already, or I don't want to do this. Yeah. Before I flick it off, and then again, first thing I say, thank you for the opportunity to be who I am, where I am, with what I have at this moment in time. I start with that.
That's your first thought of the...
First thought. As soon as I turn that alarm off, before I open my eyes, before I throw the covers back, I say that. So it's that bookends my day. So I say that before I fall asleep. That's my program that's running all night, is gratitude.
Absolutely. And scientists tell us that what you do in the first hour and the last hour bookends your day in a very profound way. So you need to get those things right. And I think it does start in the first instant of the day. So I love that. So if you're listening at the moment, you might want to maybe press pause and just write down your own, mantra, or I call them power words. Like I have my own power words that I wake up to. The other thing that I do, I just want to do whilst we're sharing, I'll share what I do. The first thing I do when I wake up is smile. Right. So just that simple act of smiling, and before I go to bed as well. I watch comedy before I go to bed. Everyone knows that about me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
go on. Yeah,
so
sorry.
for the rest of
Yeah.
it, so I'll throw the covers back. I think it's important to surround yourself with stuff as well. A lot of people see in my room and might laugh about it, but I've got this big, it's actually like a skateboard deck.
Yeah.
And on it says, I would make a great billionaire. And so that's the first thing I see when I get up in the morning as well.
I love that.
It's just like all these little positive reinforcements, isn't it?
I would make a great billionaire.
Billionaire.
Did you come up with that? I've never heard that.
I saw it at Typo years ago, and I'm like, oh, I want that. And then I remember,
Thank you, Typo.
Yes, my niece, who was with me at the time, she was about 10. She goes, "Can I have that when you're finished with it?" I'm like, "Yes, I'd like to implant those." But I think it's just that mindset, isn't it, of abundance as well. So you do
Have you thought about whether you would in fact make a good billionaire, and what would you do? What does a good billionaire do?
Yeah, I think I would make an amazing billionaire because I'm going to come from gratitude.
Yeah.
For me, it's about gratitude. It's about love. It's about abundance. It's about, focusing on bringing people together rather than dividing people. It's around, people being, prepared and proactive rather than, being in panic or paranoia or any of those things. So I think it's just, and really just supporting people to really pursue what really lights them up. So I think it would do a pretty good job.
So would you spend it on others? Is that what you mean?
It would be massively like that. Yeah. It's investing. I always look at it. It's always investing, isn't it? Like rather than spending. Again, it's those little word tweaks, isn't it? And that's part of my day as well. So I have days sometimes where I wake up and I'm really tired, or I haven't health-wise. I've had a few challenges recently, and I'll sit up and sometimes the thing will pop into my head. I'll go, look, I really feel like crap.
Yes.
Reframe straight up. So I'll find a song in my head. And I know David Goggins talks about it in his book as well about, when they're out and it's like, was it the theme from Apocalypse Now?
Yes.
Their defiance theme. So for me, I've got a couple of go-tos. When I do feel really flat energetically, then I'll start with Boom Crash Opera, The Best Thing. This is the best thing that has ever happened to me.
I know that song.
I love that song.
I love that song. Yeah.
It might be I Feel Good, James Brown.
Yeah.
Or, Pointer Systems. I'm so excited. So it's just trying to find these little reframes all through the day, because it's like, while I live with, extreme gratitude, it's not by default. It takes work every single day. So, it's getting up, it's going and having a shower. It's grateful that this morning I actually said out loud, I said, oh, geez, it's nice. It's a bit cooler today. I love having a hot shower. Like there's...
that's perfect.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I was talking about earlier. Situational gratitude.
Yeah.
Constantly reframing everything throughout the day.
Absolutely.
You just absolutely nailed it. As a one tiny little example.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to give people, those tiny little examples where they can just flip something around.
Yeah.
And there's another saying you have, I forget where I read that, but it's about you get to do something rather than...
Yeah, the word swap. Because so often we'll have situations where, we find ourselves in a situation where we're beating ourselves up or we're not happy about something we need to do. So we'll go down the mindset and we'll be saying, oh, I have to do this. And that the energy around I have to do this is heavy, and it feels like it's obligation. It feels like it doesn't feel good.
Yes.
But then if you flip that to I get to do this, like straight away energetically that feels lighter.
Yes.
It feels like it's a privilege. It feels like it's actually an opportunity rather than, an obligation. And so it's all those little things, and even those situational gratitude again. It's like when I came in this morning, I said, oh, the traffic gods were kind to me today.
Yep.
It's all those little things.
So you notice the little things.
And express that.
Verbally, out loud? Or
verbally, whether it's to myself,
to yourself,
through writing, through the journaling at the end of the day. It's all of those things. It's always checking in on them, because we get what we look for.
Yes.
And if we keep looking for those good things and we keep acknowledging those good things, then we're going to get more of them. Whereas flip side, if we keep focusing on the fear and what might happen and all the things that are wrong, we're going to manifest more of that.
Yeah, you attract what you fear. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Now, you mentioned journaling just then. That's something that I've been doing since the age of 19, and I have all these stacks of journals. Most people don't realise how super important that conversation you have with yourself and making the time to have that conversation with yourself. One is people don't know how to do it. I know a lot of people that say, yeah, I want to buy a journal. They might buy a journal and then they'll write their goals for the first day and it just peters out. And I know because I've done that in the past, but I have a particular framework for journaling. I'm, in fact, holding a workshop very soon about that most important, I think, thing that you need to do at one point in the day. And David Goggins talked about it in my podcast with him. He says that he was an avid journaler as well. And I did not know that about him. So I'm seeing a common thread amongst people who have got their shit together, right? And that is that they have the conversation. They have the tough conversation with themselves. And it's the most important conversation that we can have. So tell me, I read somewhere that you haven't missed journaling in 4 years.
Almost 5 now.
Almost 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not missed a single day.
Why is it important for building resilience and dealing with adversity? And why do you keep doing it? What's the payoff for you? For someone that's listening that might have, a job, demanding job, a partner, 2 kids, mortgages, school fees. I know what they're thinking. It's like, I don't have time to journal, right? Now, I journal maybe 2 or 3 minutes in the morning, sometimes 5 minutes. Now, if I've had a shitty day and I need to process a lot of things, I might actually process a lot of feelings and it might take me 20 minutes of journaling. But the main thing is to do it every day.
Yeah.
So what drives you to do it, has driven you to do it every day for the last 5 years?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like I only got into journaling, it's probably about 6 years ago. And I hadn't journaled since I was in primary school. Now, what was really interesting about my primary school journaling is when I was in hospital for those 7 months, the thing that I was worried about more than what I was going through was my parents finding my journal at home.
As a teenager, you would, yeah.
And what almost breaks my heart now when I think about it is I still remember the first time I went home after being in hospital. The first thing I did was I went and found that journal. I ripped it into tiny little pieces and threw it in the bin.
Why? Why did you do that?
I was so fearful about if anyone read it.
To know your feelings.
Yeah. Where I was at, what I was up to, like all that sort of stuff. It was, and I did not journal again until my mid-30s. And so then I got back into journaling and I just started with keeping it simple. Because again, I think this is, as you touched on, so many people have got busy lives and they're thinking, well, this is just one more thing. But the way I came to journaling was to just go, look, I'm going to keep it really simple. And it was about the consistency was the key. So I started with a commitment to do it 90 days, no exception. And what I did was it was 2 things. I either just answered the question, what was the best thing that happened today? And sometimes to prompt that, I would start with a cue of today I had the opportunity to.
Right,
and finish the sentence. And so my commitment was 1 sentence. If it went beyond that, that was fine, but that was my commitment. And I had nights where I actually realised I'd got to bed and I'd realised I hadn't journaled. So I actually got back out of bed. And for me, that's not easy. Yes. I got back out of bed and then did the journal. I do it electronically, my evening journals.
Yes.
So I did that and then would get back into bed. And I did that multiple times. So that first stint, I did 15 months-ish without a break of 1 day. And that was super powerful. Then I dropped the ball a little bit. I probably did it once a week. And then once I was doing some book launch stuff and journaling came up again and I thought, okay, I need to live and breathe exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And so, I haven't missed a day in that. And sometimes for me, it was about processing. Sometimes it was just about capturing. But as you mentioned too, when you've really got some emotional stuff going on, that journal can get pretty lengthy. I've had nights where I've written 2,500 words because I've been processing.
But is that a form of therapy, self-therapy?
Oh, yeah. I kind of a little bit jokingly say sometimes, but it's true that journaling has probably saved me tens of thousands of dollars in therapy over the years.
Yeah.
That's how I process. It's
absolutely,
and it's capturing that stuff. Yep. And what I love too about the program that I use is after you've journaled for a period of time, it's got a feature called the looking glass. So if you enable that, I get an email every night that says, on this day, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, this is what you wrote.
Ah, yeah.
Which is really fascinating because it's like, it usually elicits one of two things. It either elicits, wow, look how far I've come, or bloody hell, I had all the answers then and I still haven't done anything with it. So it's super powerful, and it's I just think it's just a commitment to one sentence every day. But yeah, it does help to process. It helps you to capture, to reflect, to even just pose questions. Sometimes I just put questions in there. But I always do it before I go to bed, because then that clears my head. So I'm not laying there when I'm going to sleep thinking or processing. I've already done that processing before I go to bed.
I love that, because the important thing about that is that your conscious mind doesn't always have the answers, but by writing the question down, your subconscious goes to work on it at night.
Yep.
Because I've found that has happened to me a few times. Is I'll write the question, wake up in the morning with the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at 3 o'clock in the morning in the bathroom. I find that often I'll be 3 o'clock in the morning going to the bathroom. I'll come back into my room. I'll grab my phone. I'll grab Evernote, and I've written a few hundred words, which has either been an outline for, a blog or a series of questions, or just like, wow, it just seems you get these downloads in the middle of the night.
Yes.
So I just get them out of my head and then I go back to sleep. So I never want to lay down with something on my mind.
Yep. I really like that. So I'm not the only person that does that, wakes up at 3.
Oh, the best ideas come through at 3 a.m. in the bathroom.
I always get the nudge from my wife saying, go back to sleep.
It's like that.
Now, one of the quotes you have is focus on what and why, and the how will take care of itself. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think so.
How does the how take care of itself? Does it just appear, or?
Well, it's kind of linked to what we just talked about sometimes posing those questions and letting the subconscious go to work. But yeah, a lot of the time is that people don't do things because they don't know how.
Yes.
And that happens. So yeah, I think when we get stuck when we get stuck on the how, then that's the time to go back and go, well, what is it?
Yes.
And why do you want it? And I think it's those things. Obviously, Simon Sinek's talked about so much about the power of start with why.
I haven't come across someone with one single message talk so much about it and write so much about it.
I know. He's done well, hasn't he?
Yeah. But I love the way he's probably one of the best speakers actually I've ever come across, Simon Sinek, and he does it with so much passion and intensity that it just sticks with you. So keep on doing what you're doing, Simon. So what is your current what and why?
Yeah.
What's your biggest
why? Look, I go back to the why.
Yeah.
The why is so powerful now. For me, I feel a deep moral responsibility to keep doing what I'm doing, because I know that, especially in the world today, there's a lot of people that are struggling, a lot of people that may not really pursue what deep down they want to do because of fear or all of those things. But the real thing, the reality is it's all about getting people to really tap into who they are and get past all their excuses of why not, and then be able to focus on, doing what they really want. And just knowing that through sharing my story and being able to share a few key messages. So anytime I speak, I'm always thinking about that one person that's in the room that I know that if I don't show up completely present and at my best, that whatever that thing that is going on in their world is not going to change. But if I show up 100% with me, with complete connection with that person, with that room, then I know that I can help shift something in their life that could change the entire trajectory of their life.
I love that.
So I feel so responsible now to do that. And also that it's not about me now, because I never wanted to do this because I was so worried about what people would think about me.
Yes.
And I realised it wasn't about me. I had a mentor that said, look, it's not about you, it's about them. And if you don't share your story, you're being selfish. And once I started doing that, and I just started to see all these people that say, well, because you said that, I did this. And the emails and the messages I get 3, 4, 5 years later that people said, you helped me do this.
And that's your big why.
That's it, is to
Yeah,
keep doing
love
that, is to get people to get out of the entitlement mentality, just to, really focus on themselves and the impact they can have. And we all have influence. And I think this is a big thing. And people don't realise that no matter who you are, you've got influence of some description. And helping them to realise that they've got that and to use it.
So can you give us, without using names, just an example of someone you've coached or someone that you've had an impact on their life? And obviously, because it's those stories that keeps driving you, inspiring you. And this is something that David Goggins talks about. He's saying that it's not about me anymore. I wake up and the moment that I feel like down in the dumps, I'm tired, I don't want to work out, I force myself to do it because I know someone's watching, someone's listening. And I've got 2.3 million followers who are, counting on me to show up. So it's not about you, he keeps saying. And what you said then just parallels that. So I really love it. But can you give us some stories of some people's lives that you've impacted that drives you in return, that inspires you to keep going?
Yeah, there's a couple I can think of straight off, and I think one of the ladies was one of the first ones that made me realise that, even just being in a room with somebody for a couple of hours, that can make huge impacts. And this is a lady I ran a workshop for, like a family and community services type government environment in South Australia when I was living there, and there was a lot of resistance in that room. And I felt at the end of it, I thought, did I really get through to that room? Because I even remember having one particular person who was particularly hostile and had the arms folded and was scowling at me the whole time, put her hand up and said, well, I think resilience is all about luck and our clients don't have any hope. And I was like, hang on, you guys are meant to be helping these people. Yeah. And so I did a little bit of a reframe on that with her. And I said, again, I don't believe resilience is about luck. It's about choice. And at any given moment, we can choose that we're not happy with where we are. We don't have to know, how we're going to change it, where we're going to go. But we just need to make a decision that we want and deserve something better than where we are right now. And we all have that power at any given time.
Yep.
And it was 12 months later, it was another person that was in the room emailed me. And she actually listed all of these things that she'd done as a result of the things I'd shared in that day. And
do you remember what some of those were?
She'd actually started. She did a lot of artwork and stuff like that. So it was things that she did outside of work. So she'd actually gone a little bit more in on her passions and things like that. So she was really happy with that. But then she said that she was having some challenges in the work environment and wanted to know, did I do one-on-one work? So I ended up doing 3 months one-on-one with her, and each session she was coming back going, wow, I was able to actually look at this person and their behaviour and almost look at them like they were alien, because it was because of how it was just being able to reframe those things. So she was able to actually change. She was under a lot of pressure, was feeling physically ill from the stress, and then just step by step, by going through and being able to do some coaching, she was able to go, wow, I actually don't feel sick. I'm actually happier to go to work. But eventually then ended up going, you know what, I'm actually going to move to Mackay. Like, I'm just going to completely change this, and got to the point where she was like, you know what, this whole thing here isn't serving me, even though I felt better about it. Yes. That was great. And then I also did a couple of scholarship coaching clients around the same time. And one lady was a young woman who had a severe accident and then had cancer as well, and was in her 20s. So was, had to end up using a wheelchair. And so I just said, come to my house. So she came to my house a couple of times a month for a few months, and we just worked through getting her to, to start to sort of shift what her opportunities were, see what she wants to do with her life. And then, so that was about 5 years ago, and I got a message from her only a month or so ago saying she'd had, since then she'd had a child, she had all these things, she ended up back on her feet. Then she had something else happen, and she ended up, basically she was told it was going to be a wheelchair for life. So she ended up in a pretty dire situation. But she said, you've been in the back of my mind, your voice has been in the back of my mind the whole time.
Wow.
And that kept her going, and now she's, smashing it in the gym, doing all this sort of stuff, and, it looks like she may even recover from that again. And she just said, your voice has been there the whole time.
So you taught her to reframe everything that was going on, and that made her stronger.
Yeah, and she was just able to, for every single bit, and always be, for me, one of the things I always believe the best is yet to come. So, there always needs to be something pulling us into the future.
Yeah.
In a positive way.
In a positive way. Yep. So that's one of the things you keep telling yourself is the best is yet to come.
Always. I always believe that. And I've had amazing experiences so far, but having that perception the best is yet to come helps keep you going every single day.
Yeah, I really like that. I think inadvertently, I walk around with that notion in my mind that something good is around the corner. But what happens when something bad comes? You got to be prepared for that. So and that's where you turn to your reframing and gratitude.
Yeah.
And the journaling. But one of the things that you do really well with business leaders is that you teach them how to have difficult conversations with people. So tell us about that, because I employ quite a few staff, and sometimes you need to have these difficult conversations. So what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, I find the best way of doing that is to not just wait until there's a difficult conversation that needs to be had to have a conversation at all. Because so often, especially when everything's so fast paced, there's a tendency to have your conversations usually at times where it might be an appraisal thing going on and that sort of stuff.
Yep.
So I encourage all leaders and anyone that's working with people in general is to have frequent informal conversations with their staff all the time, at least once a week, to have an informal conversation. And it can be just a few questions. It can be just like, hey, how are you feeling at the moment? What are you working on? What challenges are you having at the moment? How can I best support you? And so if you have those conversations all the time, you build trust.
Yeah.
And then when it does come to having those challenging conversations, generally, if you're having those conversations frequently, it doesn't get to the point where you have to have a really challenging conversation.
That's absolutely true, yeah.
Yeah, because those little things are going to be, you'll get an indicator that something's happening through there. And because you've got that rapport and that trust, then you can start to have those conversations early, rather than if you are, a person that's, very removed from their lives, then it is very difficult to then go and have those conversations. Obviously, they still need to be had.
Yes.
But I think that's the best way to do it. And it also just creates that trust, that sense of community. You get to know people. You get to know what motivates and inspires them as well. And then you can be a cheerleader for them, and you get to know what their motivators are, so then you know how to work with those people better as well.
I think there are some businesses and business leaders and senior executives who don't like to get too close to people. And I think it's a bit of a shame because, a lot of people say business is not personal. Don't take it personal, it's just business. For me, business is personal. And I think the reason why we've been successful, because I do get to know my leadership team, my people very well, my clients. And because ultimately we're humans and we don't just leave our humanity at the door in business. And the people that I know that have customers and clients who are the best at their game are the ones that have a personal relationship with their clients, whether they're lawyers, mortgage brokers, real estate agents. And so I think we need to move away from that old, principle of, don't get too close, don't get too close. If you don't, you're always going to have a business that's numb. It's just ticking along. It's textbook stuff. So I really love what you just said then. And you never have to have a difficult conversation if you're always checking in and connecting with people from the heart.
Yeah. It makes them feel that they feel valued and seen.
Yeah.
And because that's one of the things that comes up a lot in business is why people leave places is because they don't feel that they're valued or that their work is meaningful or things like that. So if you can always be, through those conversations, helping them to connect with the importance they have to the overall, then that really helps people to actually, and especially when times are tough, it helps people to go, well, look, we'll keep pushing through this because there's a greater thing at play here. And a lot of it's all about being proactive. And again, that's why my approach to resilience is proactive. It's all about building these skills so that when something happens, you're not completely blindsided by it. Because unfortunately, particularly in a business context, I've come across so many situations where they have an approach to resilience where it's just become synonymous with coping.
Yes.
And it is reactive. And it's like
that's exactly what I was talking about when we first opened. Yeah.
And it's not a great approach because again, we can't just sit back and wait for stuff to happen.
Yes.
We need to be ready for it. And then also look at it with optimism and looking at all these things, all this adversity and this change as looking at it through the lens of opportunity and possibility rather than disaster and doom and gloom.
Absolutely. Love that. So what brought you to Upgrade Your Life? Was it Goggins?
Actually, I came across Upgrade Your Life through Jim Quick.
Oh, it was okay.
It was through Jim. So I did one of his programs online many, many years ago.
Yes.
So I followed Jim's social media. Sort of into late last year, I really felt that I work on my own a lot and, you feel a bit isolated. So for me, it was about looking for a community, looking for a tribe, looking for where I could spend time with like-minded people. And so I decided probably about October, it was just after I came back from the US, I decided that I was going to look for a couple of, I thought, really high quality multi-day events that, it wasn't so much about the speakers, it was more about the community. And obviously then I came and got completely blown away by the speakers as well. But that was what brought me there.
The reason why I say that is because a lot of the things you say have parallels to what David Goggins says. And so a lot of the stuff in your book as well.
And when I was listening to David's book, I was like, but we are so aligned. And that was the conversation I had with David.
Yes.
And it was just our whole approach. And even to the point where, both of us, we're not academics or psychologists. We haven't researched all this stuff. We've just lived it. And so my approach is it's backed by life rather than backed by science. And I shared that with David, and we definitely bonded over that. And having David, toughest man in the world, label me a badass, I was like, I'll wear that with pride.
Absolutely. So can I just have a look at your book there?
Absolutely. There we go.
So the book is simply called
How to Be Resilient, exactly what it says on the can.
And I love how-to books because for me it's about key takeaways. So where can people get a copy of this book?
Any of your local bookstores, Amazon, online ones. So if you like the physical books, otherwise you can get the audio and the ebook from howtoberesilient.com.
And is it your voice on the audio?
It is.
Oh, wonderful. That's good.
Yes.
I have this thing. I really need to hear the author's voice. Yeah, that's really, really good. I haven't actually read the whole book. I've read snippets from what I've seen online. So thank you for bringing this in. I hope this is for me.
It absolutely is for you.
And so thank you very much for coming on our High Branch podcast. I'm hoping you'll be a regular contributor.
I would absolutely love to.
Yeah, and before I go, there was something you mentioned to me offline, you may not remember, about, you said, and I wrote it down, it's get out of your head, make a difference externally rather than focusing on your own shit. Do you remember?
Yes.
That's something you believe in. So this has led you to volunteering as a youth worker as well, and even getting into politics. Is that still on the horizon or not really?
No, that's it. That's history.
That's history, okay.
So it was all about making a difference. But I guess the volunteering part, I ended up over in the Solomon Islands.
Yeah.
Was my first overseas trip, and I went over there and mentored people with disability, and that was just mind-blowing. Completely changed my world.
Yeah, I don't think people realise how much of an impact that might have on other people who need to hear that. So someone like yourself who goes in and starts, helping them with reframing and resilience and sharing your story. Like the impact that has is worth thousands of hours of therapy, and I really want to thank you for doing that and for rising above what you went through. It was tough. In hindsight, you look back and there's probably someone else that you're talking about who has gone through the stoner phase and the alcohol and all that. But that's how, as humans, we're imperfect and we go through those times, don't we? But the main thing is to come out of it the other end stronger, bigger, and live to share our story and pass it on. And I really want to thank you for doing that with such courage. And thank you, Stacey.
You are very welcome. And it's interesting looking back that I know when I first started speaking, one of my questions I had to other speakers was, do you become desensitized to your own story when you tell it all the time?
That's right, yeah.
And I actually feel I've become so much more connected to it. So rather than sometimes looking back and going, was that someone else? I feel every single bit of it.
Oh, okay.
I do,
Yep,
and I love that. And
yeah.
how that's lit up for me is every time I'm in front of an audience, that connection I have as I'm sharing these stories, and I see that light up in them.
Yes.
And that fuels it in me as well. So I know that keeping that connection and doing that, and also similarly being able to look back and go, celebrate all those successes, look at all the things I've survived, and then go, at me, what else have you got?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. So going back on all your achievements and reminding yourself, and that's something that I want people to remember, that I don't think you'd realise how many achievements you would have in your day, in your week, in your month, in your year, in your lifetime. So a lot of people will sit down and write the things that they're grateful for. But one of the things that I think is even more powerful is to sit and write down all your achievements for the day. And what Stacey just said really reminded me of that. And I wanted to remind you guys, this conversation could go on forever. But
maybe to be continued, because as you say that, I'm like, all these other things are popping up. I'm like, to be continued.
Yeah, so I'd love to have you back, if you will. Come back.
Would love to.
That's awesome. All right, guys. Well, that's all from us this week at A Higher Branch. Live consciously, my friends.